President Zelenskyy is due to meet the King as well tomorrow during his visit to the UK. Let's bring in Sky's Deputy Political Editor Sam Coates, who is in Downing Street now. Sam, President Trump took great delight in receiving a letter from Keir Starmer signed by the King earlier in the week. It makes you wonder what he'll make of this breaking line now.
Hello, Matt. I think the biggest implication of the breaking news that you've just revealed is it shows that the entire apparatus of the British state is throwing itself behind Ukraine, behind President Zelenskyy at this uncertain, some would think perilous moment in the conflict with Ukraine and the sort of geopolitical order, if that's not putting it too big. By agreeing and allowing a meeting between the President and King Charles, and that will, by the way, have been done completely in consultation with Keir Starmer and the people in the building behind me who have very deep connections to the palace. No such move would have been done without the explicit authorisation and probably at the suggestion of the Prime Minister. By doing that, Keir Starmer and the King are showing that the British state is standing shoulder to shoulder with President Zelenskyy at this moment where his relationship with the US is extremely uncertain. And yes, I think you're completely right to draw that link between the delight of President Trump at getting his invitation, that letter signed by King Charles on Thursday evening, inviting him to another second state visit by President Trump. And now what we're seeing with President Zelenskyy really having a sort of expedited meeting with the King, if you like, in the next few hours. I think these matters of symbolism are important. They are one of the big tools in our diplomatic toolkit to try and show whose side we are on in this conflict. Because, Matt, as I think you've been doing all this day, it all comes back to that extended 30-minute plus meeting in the Oval Office last night that stunned the world, stunned prime ministers, including the people in the building behind me, diplomats, and many of those watching it at home, as President Trump positioned himself really not on Ukraine's side, but as simply a mediator between, and I thought this was one of the most striking things about that meeting, positions himself almost in the middle, sort of creating an equivalence between Russia and Ukraine. Britain and Ukraine, of course, would strongly argue that Russia was the aggressor that carried out the invasion 3 years ago and in 2014 to take Ukrainian land. But there you have the US president whose predecessors condemned Russia for this, simply saying, I am the honest broker in this conflict. I will deal with both sides. And that's the sort of crystallization of that switch in the American position, which we have seen, whether it's at the UN earlier in the week, whether it's seeing in the G7 now, whether we're seeing it in bilateral meetings that have stunned the world. You are seeing that very, very clearly. And so, if, in effect, what today is all about, and it's an unplanned day of diplomacy, I don't think that Keir Starmer had the meeting that he's got in, we don't know exactly, probably in an hour or so, with President Zelenskyy. That wasn't scheduled for today. Today is a mopping up exercise and a desperate attempt to work out what has happened. So President Zelenskyy has interestingly flown to the UK as the first destination from the kind of horror summit of last night. And I think what the conversation in the building behind me will be, and with figures like Peter Mandelson, our ambassador in Washington, is to say, look, whatever the sort of signs of tempers, whatever the optics of last night, now is a moment for cool heads, because anything else simply will not be helpful. If you go very closely through the sorts of things that Donald Trump was saying last night, it doesn't suggest like a deal is completely off the table. He sees it, as it were, as a sort of two-step thing. There are big areas of difference between the way that the UK would approach this and the way that America seem to be wanting to approach this. But there is still just about the potential for some kind of landing zone, although not nearly as bumpy not nearly as smooth as they would have wanted. And so the meeting between Starmer and Zelenskyy will be about bringing things back on track as quickly as possible. If you want to look, for instance, at the biggest areas of difference, I mean, I think when you compare Donald Trump's words with the UK position last night, you heard how Donald Trump wants an immediate ceasefire. But Zelenskyy in the UK would say, well, that's not the sort of be-all and end-all, because that would then leave some of Ukrainian territory, which was invaded by Russia, which is currently under Russian control, to remain under Russian control. So that is an area of difference that the UK and the president need to work through and see whether or not they can find a way of bridging that gap. The President of the United States clearly wants to sign this minerals deal, which he regards as valuable. That was the kind of win for President Trump that he was expecting to get yesterday when Zelenskyy turned up in that Oval Office meeting. At the start of the meeting, it was quite clear that President Trump was expecting to sign that document yesterday. Of course, after it all went south, about 40 minutes after that meeting began, no such signature was made. But there you have something that President Trump wants, that maybe the UK can remind him that is still on the table, and that could be one of those factors that brings the two sides together as well.